India and England, it's all over in the test front. We are here, we're back. Pace Journal, the preview and review show. Today, I'm your host, Nikhil Uttamchandani. Joined is the resident analyst, our resident analyst, Tymal Mills. Tymal, thank you so much for coming onto the show. A lot to discuss. Your team, England, not looking so good, ending up losing the series 3-1 after winning it. Your reaction?
Welcome to the Pace Journal. Welcome to the Pace Journal.
Yeah, obviously it all started so well, didn't it? However long ago it was in Shanghai, that first test. And since then, obviously, it's been pretty tough sledding for England. There were moments in this test match where they were in the game. Obviously, they won the toss and had a bat, so they kind of had another opportunity to get some runs on the board. The pitch definitely wasn't as extreme in this second match in Ahmedabad than compared to the first match. But they'll be very disappointed. There's been lots of talk already in the press. You know, Joe Root in his post-game pressers and things talking about how, where they need to get better. I'm sure we'll get into it later in the show. But a disappointing series for England, especially after going 1-0 up in the first test.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, India, let's touch on them first of all. A very dominant performance by them. We saw them lose in the first test, but they really bounced back strongly, whether that had to do with advantage of home conditions or whatever it had to do with. The point is, they were extremely dominant in their home conditions. What do you think are some of the things that they did well throughout the series?
Spin, both obviously bowling it and playing it was obviously a huge part, wasn't it? You just look at the wicket takers, Ashwin and Axar Patel. I just pulled it up on my laptop now. It makes quite strange reading to look at the whole list of wicket takers. You have obviously Ashwin took 32 wickets in 4 matches, which is incredible, going at an average of only 14. Axar Patel not far behind. He played 3 games. He took 27 games. His first 3 games in Test cricket as well. 27 wickets, averaging only 10.5. And then Jack Leach for England obviously chipped in with 18 himself. So good showing for him. But you can see the top 3 wicket takers were obviously spin bowlers, and India had 2 outstanding spinners, whereas England only had 1 spinner, that was able to kind of consistently be relied upon. Obviously, Moeen Ali only played 1 test match for one reason or another, which again we'll get into later in the show. But I think the key to this series was India having 2 outstanding spinners that were constantly testing England, and unfortunately England weren't able to kind of hold up to the test in terms of their batting. And on the other side of the coin, England just didn't quite have the quality of spin to exploit the surface on offer. And whenever they did have good passages in the game, India were more often than not able to ride them out and get through to the other side.
Yeah, before we look at the entire series, I want to touch on this game specifically because obviously this is a review for the 4th test as well as the series. It was definitely a more balanced pitch. We saw, I assessed early on day 1, you saw some grass on it. You thought something would be in it for the seamers. 9 seamer wickets in this test. So our Pace Journal family will be very happy with that. We saw Ben Stokes, he took 4. James Anderson took 2. Mohammad Siraj was electric as usual and replacing Jasprit Bumrah. So tell me your assessment of conditions and the surface. And do you think it was a good toss to win by England to bat first?
Yeah, it's always a good toss to win, especially in the subcontinent. As I said, it wasn't the extreme, raging turner that the last pitch was. Obviously, we're back to day conditions and the red ball as opposed to day nighter and the pink ball. So you expected it to be a little bit more placid, and it was. The pitch was good, wasn't it? It looked, as you see, got your own
the red one today. I've got the red,
ready to bowl. But it's. You've made me lose track with that red ball. It makes me come out in a rash. I haven't bowled with a red ball for about 5 years now. I'm only about the white ball life now. But no, the pitch, it was a good pitch, wasn't it? There was swing there early. There was seam there, kind of all through the game. Mohammad Siraj, as you say, he was really impressive. We kind of spoke about, we thought it would be Shadab to come in for Jasprit Bumrah, but for one reason or another, they went with Siraj, and he looks really lively, didn't he? He's got that real kind of that snap of the wrist, and he gets the ball to kind of, he's not coming up hugely quick on the speed gun, kind of, mid 130s, but, he seems to trouble the batsman for a little bit of pace, bit of bounce, seam movement. He was really impressive. A quiet game for Rishabh Sharma, but that can happen. I think England obviously wanted to win the toss. and hope that the pitch deteriorated come the fourth innings. So then it would have been very tricky to bat on. But unfortunately, as we've seen, that they lost early wickets at one point. They were 30 for 3 batting first. You're always disappointed. Johnny Bairstow struggling a little bit for form. Sibley Crawley. And then obviously there was a little bit of a recovery in the middle order. Ben Stokes, Dan Lawrence in particular. But yeah, it wasn't a good showing on, as you say, especially when you get the first bite of the cherry on what looked a decent pitch, a little bit of steam movement. You've got to be scoring more than 200, and when you don't, you are up against it.
Yes, definitely. And in terms of selection from an England point of view, Tymal, I was very surprised to see, obviously, based on the last test where they definitely missed that spinner, we saw them opt for an extra spinner and even bring in Dan Lawrence, who can both spin as well. But do you think that was sort of, too much of an influence from the last test? Because to be honest, I thought there was something in this surface for the seamers. Did England miss that frontline seamer in a Jofra Archer, a Stuart Broad, because they only played one in James Anderson and then asked Ben Stokes to take up the responsibility? Do you think they sort of missed out on selection there?
Yeah, a little bit. It was obvious that they were worried about the batting. Obviously, the batting hasn't fired throughout the whole series, so they felt like we need an extra batsman in there. So they brought Dan Lawrence back into the side to come in and bat number 7. He's normally obviously a top order batter. So that pushed Ben Foakes down to 8, Dom Best down to 9. So in theory, they kind of shored up their batting because it's been a struggle for them for the whole series. So that was the thinking. But as a result of that, as you say, obviously you play your 2 spinners, and then that leaves you with only James Anderson as a frontline spinner, and then Ben Stokes has then got to be your other frontline seamer. And to be fair, Anderson and Stokes bowled really well, didn't they? Especially that opening spell from James Anderson. I think he started with 5 maidens on the reel, which is obviously an unbelievable effort in those conditions. Ben Stokes, he bowled some long spells, kind of 6, 7, 8 over spells, and getting close to 40-degree heat. So he charged in. He looked really good. He got that wicket of Virat Kohli that reared off the surface, took the glove, and really impressive delivery. But yeah, you'd say looking back now, that they could have done with another seamer. And again, there's been a lot of chat, obviously, with the rotation policy and the way that England have chosen to go about the squad for the tour. Someone like Sam Curran or Chris Wokes, that kind of genuine bowling all-rounder, would have probably been a better shout or a preferred option, to the extra out-and-out batter in Dan Lawrence, because obviously Wokes and Sam Curran are good batters in their own right. And as you say, England did look a little bit light on the seam front, especially with Dom Best struggling to kind of hold his own at the other end from Jack Leach. That was the key. They needed Best to really be able to hold down an end, so then they could bowl a lot of spin, and then have Anderson and Stokes maybe rotate from an end. But unfortunately, he struggled a little bit in this Test match.
I'm glad you touched on the selection policy, because it's something that I wanted to ask you about. I've heard a lot of England fans moan and groan about it. And to be honest, I put England's detriment and unfortunate circumstances in this series down to that selection policy, because I think they've been extremely unlucky. For example, you bring in Moeen Ali in the second test. He takes 8 wickets, scores a blistering 43, and then he leaves. You also have, as you just mentioned, Chris Wokes. He was sent home for a rest period. I thought he could have been a huge plus, because they're looking to strengthen that batting. And he also provides that frontline seaming option. He's not there available for selection. So I really thought that this selection policy for England, it sort of hurt them in the end. But in terms of, I know England, for example, just came from Sri Lanka. They've been on a long streak of away cricket. What do you make of the selection policy? Were there any things that, thought ended up hurting England in the end? Or do you think it's just something that's required based on the amount of cricket is being played in terms of England away from home?
Look, it's a tricky one to answer, and that's all the cricket journalists, pundits back in the UK now. That's all everybody's talking about. Is giving guys rest through Test series, especially when some guys are obviously going on to play the IPL in not so long. So where the priorities lie, as you say, England had a couple of tests in Sri Lanka before coming straight to India. They're prioritizing guys, mental health and kind of well-being, from being stuck in bubbles, being in hotels, especially if you're not playing necessarily. Think of somebody like Chris Wokes, didn't play a single game, doing a lot of 12-man fitness work, gym. It's tough. You've got no release. You can't leave the hotel, go for a coffee, go to a restaurant. You can't do anything. So they're very, very wary of that in these current times, which you can't complain with, in my opinion, if that's how they're going to go about it. Mo and Ali the same. There was obviously Joe Root kind of got thrown under the bus a little bit, and was maybe misspoke slightly. Then it made it out like Mo and Ali had chosen to go home, but it was always his scheduled rest time, which they kind of gave to guys that were going to be coming back for the white ball series. So it's tricky. There's no real right way to answer it, in my opinion, because everybody has different priorities. You have to look at bigger pictures sometimes. But you would say on a pure cricketing front, you would have liked, I'm sure Joe Root would have loved to have his full strength squad to pick from every single test match. And unfortunately, he didn't have that. And as a result, they were chopping and changing the side a lot, trying to find different balances. Maybe, as you say, in that last test, they could have done with a Sam Curran or a Chris Wokes. Just for a slightly different balance to the side. But yeah, it's been a tricky tour, tricky 4 test matches. I'm sure they would have learned a lot. There's already been talks about Joe Root saying that, the county system in England needs to be better or more slanted to get spinners in the game. So they, batsmen get used to facing more spin, and similarly, spinners get used to bowling more overs in England, because unfortunately it doesn't happen that much. But look, India come back to England in the middle of the English summer for the return series, don't they? So it'll be interesting to see how they go in literally 4 or 5 months time.
Yeah, finally, just the last point I want to touch on in terms of this test. Rishabh Pant, 101. Obviously, Washington Sundar, a big reason why India were able to get a massive lead. But I'm telling you, Tama, I can't believe that. I just can't believe the magnitude of a player that this guy is. Reverse sweeping James Anderson. Obviously, that's what everybody's speaking about. Over the slips for 4 with a brand new ball. Just talk to me about Rishabh Pant. What is a way to describe this young man? Because I find it really hard. He's so unorthodox in terms of what we are expecting in test cricket, but he's a born match winner. And how big of a difference do you think it is having these sort of guys in your team, especially in test cricket?
He's box office, isn't he? That's the only way to describe him. Look, I'm not a fan of batsmen in general, but he's somebody that I enjoy watching. T20 cricket, obviously. You've seen some of the innings he plays for was Delhi Daredevils, now Delhi Capitals. But yeah, in test matches as well, he makes it must-watch cricket, because the thing that he's kind of getting mostly applauded for in this innings, is how they played the situation well, didn't they? He wasn't all guns blazing from ball 1 like we saw earlier on in the series in Chennai when he went after Jack Leach straight away. He just played normally for a while, and then as he got into the innings, as India got kind of out of a little bit of trouble, because remember when he came to the crease, they were 146 for 6, I think. They were 146 for 6 at some point when Ashwin got out. So they were still 50 runs behind the game. England were bowling well, and he just destroyed it. He destroyed really any hopes of England getting back into that game. That blitz, as you say, when he went pretty much from kind of 70 to 100 was brilliant to watch. As you say, reverse sweeping James Anderson with the new ball was special to watch. And then Washington Sundar at the other end just kind of went about his business. Obviously finished 94, 96 not out. Obviously he'd be disappointed. You always want 100, but I'm sure his teammates were very, very giving him all the credit that he deserved for his role, whilst Rishabh Pant was doing what he was doing at the other end. So having those players in the lower middle order that can take a game away from an opposition, or get your own team right back in there, is it's invaluable.
Yeah, and moving on to the overall series, let's touch on England's batting first of all, because obviously many will say it's subpar. Joe Root, the highest score in the entire series, but when you look at it in context, 368 runs. Obviously, he got that 218 in the first innings of the first test, so only 150 runs thereafter. So he was sort of disappointed with that. But in terms of England's top 3, they did not give them much in the series, and we know how important it is for the top order to see off that new ball. I'll just give you some stats here. Dom Sibley, he only averaged above 14. Rory Burns, same. He only averaged over 13. And I mean, Johnny Bairstow was, even worse, averaging just 7. So how much of a lack of application do you think it was from England's top 3? They did chop and change. We saw Zach Crawley, who came back from injury, got a 50, but nothing really else. How big of a disadvantage was that for England not having their top 3 firing?
Yeah, it's tough. And obviously when you're it was obviously a weakness against spin a lot of the time. When any time that India opened with spin, which was obviously a lot during this Test match, it was tough going, wasn't it? From ball one, there was obviously a huge amount of talk about guys getting out to the straight ball. As soon as the ball kind of turned past the bat, it kind of got in their heads a little bit. But obviously England did come into this with a relatively inexperienced top order. So, Sibley, Crawley especially, Rory Burns has played a little bit now. Johnny Bairstow's been in and out of the side a lot over a long period of time. He's obviously brilliant in white ball cricket. Came back after a rest after a really good Sri Lanka tour, and didn't go too well for him in the Test series. So it's not ideal situations, I think, for some of the guys. Obviously, either being inexperienced or not playing a lot of cricket, coming into pretty extreme and very challenging conditions. So they're up against it a little bit, to be honest. As you say, kind of got away with it in the first game due to Joe Root's brilliance on a flat deck in the first innings. And since kind of India saw that and decided, okay, well, we're not going to have any more flat decks. We're going to really challenge them. And unfortunately, England weren't able to respond. There was a great quote from Ben Stokes, said he spent over 2 hours batting trying to not get out to the straight ball, and then he ended up getting out to a straight ball. So it's obviously in the guys' heads. They're talking about it. They're aware of it. And when you've got that kind of reverberating through a changing room, it's a difficult place to claw yourself out. Out of.
Yeah, and just from an Indian perspective now, Rohit Sharma, the second leading run scorer in this series, 345 runs. I really credit India because their best player and one of the world's best players, and Virat Kohli, only averaged 28 in this series. He did not have a great series at all. And the fact that their batting was able to execute and show that other guys were able to step up, I thought that was remarkable. And one guy is Rohit Sharma. Talk to me about him, because before this series, obviously before the Australian series, you would say a lot of people were hesitant in terms of whether Rohit Sharma was the one for Test cricket. We saw him batting at 6. But right now, the way he's gone about these last 2 series at the top of the order, really you will not have many questions about his competency at the top of the order. How impressive was he, for example, specifically in that third Test when he got 66, when the rest of the Indian batting failed and it looked like he was batting on a completely different surface? So how crucial do you think he was to India's success?
Yeah, the one thing you can say about Rohit is he didn't look, it was obviously at times it could have been very frantic, very, very messy, obviously a very difficult situation to bat in, but he always looked very calm and looked in control. Obviously, he's a very, very experienced player through many years of playing for India, IPL, etc. So there's not too much he hasn't seen. And I think that experience really kind of came to the fore. We spoke about obviously Sibley, Crawley, Burns, these guys having very little experience of playing in those conditions. Rohit Sharma's obviously been doing it for an awful long time. So that's something that kind of stood out to me, whether it was a little bit of swing or some good bowling with the new ball, Jimmy Anderson, etc., or opening up with spin, Jack Leach, theory, right-handed batter, left arm spin bowler, taking the ball away from him, just looked in control. He looked calm, and as you say, that platform, having those kind of pillars in the innings, as you say, Kohli not firing, but when you've got guys like Pujara and then Rishabh Pant coming in later, and then obviously the exploits of Ashwin, Washington Sundar coming in after them as well, India just had enough guys on form throughout the series to never really be in too much difficulty.
Yeah, and obviously, in terms of the left arm spin, before this series, Tymal, England had lost 43 wickets to left arm spin in the last 2 years. They lost 31 wickets to left arm spin, 27 from Axar Patel, who was the second leading wicket taker, and 4 from Shahbaz Nadeem. It's a clear weakness in their batting. Dom Sibley, for example, was dismissed, I think that's 9 times now, to left arm spin. And I must credit India for being able to exploit that. It's one thing to know about a team's weakness, but being able to exploit it. In terms of Axar Patel, what impressed you about him? Because it's very interesting. I was speaking to an Indian journalist, and he said the difference why he thought Axar Patel was so successful as opposed to Nadeem is because he's a lot flatter and quicker through the air. So it doesn't give the batsman a lot of time, to calibrate and figure out what Axar Patel was bowling and pick all the balls, etc. Especially with that pink ball, as we know, it made it very much more difficult. What about Axar Patel really impressed and surprised you, because he's brand new, fresh on the scene? This is his first Test series.
Well, that's part of it. What you say there, you're fresh on the scene. There's not any footage of you bowling in Test cricket. There's no data, there's no stats, so you have to take a little. And some of these guys would have faced him in the IPL, but that's obviously a completely different challenge, isn't it? A different, the goalposts are so different, so differently placed. But one thing you have to remember a little bit is that Shahbaz Nadeem played that first Test match when it was pretty flat in Chennai. It wasn't turning, it wasn't spitting, wasn't big puffs of dust. It was much nicer to bat on. And then, unfortunately, he did okay. And then Axar Patel came in for the rest of the series, where, as we know, it turned a lot. So you have to bear that into mind. But as you say, a lot of the guys that know spin bowling a lot better than what I do just say he was so accurate. He bowled, he very rarely missed the spot, and he bowled that perfect spot where if it spun, he obviously had a chance to take the edge. But if it didn't, it's carrying on and it's hitting the stumps. And as we all know, obviously, that was the main problem with this series, guys, not being able to play the straight ball after a ball or two that spins. So he was obviously, it'd be brilliant. He'd be so proud of the start he's made to his Test career. Obviously, he had conditions to help him, but you have to exploit that. And I think his accuracy and his consistency of how he's just been able to land the ball in the right spot over and over and over again, obviously gave the England batsmen nowhere to go.
Solid point you made there about Shahbaz Nadeem. Definitely have to take that into consideration. But I also think Axar Patel's batting ability has also helped him as well. I think he averages over 30 in first class cricket. So solid all around. Final player I want to touch on, Tymal, before we wrap up, Jack Leach. As an England fan, and obviously someone that you probably know, Jack Leach, how I'm sure many England fans, if there's a few positives to pull out from this series, it will be Jack Leach, because his consistency, his discipline to get 18 wickets. He caused serious problems, for example, to Virat Kohli and to other batsmen in this series. How impressed were you with Jack Leach, and what do you think his upside is for the future of England Test cricket?
Yeah, I think he's come out with a lot of positives, a lot of credit in the bank, especially after the way the series started. As you say, when Rishabh Pant came after him in Chennai and took him to the cleaners, he was going 10 and over at one point, which in Test cricket you just don't see. So the way he came back was obviously testament to him, his skill level. He bowled a lot of overs in the tour. Just pulling it up now. Third leading wicket taker in the whole series. Bowled more overs than Axar Patel. Bowled 161 overs, and he bowled about 20 overs less than Ravi Ashwin. So he was asked to bowl a lot, as you say, being the main spinner in the English side, with Moeen Ali and Don Bess at the other end having varying levels of success and varying levels, obviously, of participation as well. But yeah, I think he's one of the few players to come out with some real credit. I think he's obviously earned himself a good long run in the side. He'll obviously be the number one spinner now when England go back to the different conditions of the English summer. It's a very different way of bowling when he's going to be playing county championship cricket back home now. And as you say, it's a problem with the English season and the English conditions that unfortunately you don't have this plethora and this real depth in the spin bowling department, because you very, very rarely in county cricket get teams playing two spinners or two genuine spinners in a game. A lot of the time you won't get any. It'll just be seam bowled for the whole 4 days if the game goes to 4 days, because it's often just swinging and seaming around until kind of halfway through the season. So he's done a really good job, really controlled himself, held himself in the right way, as I said, especially when Rishabh Pant was coming after him in that first game.
Yeah, guys, as you would all remember, last week when we recorded the preview for the fourth test, I debuted a very special segment on this show called the Friendly Wagers. So me and Tymal picked out 3 stats which we deemed, that we thought would be important to the scheme of the game. And we picked most runs, most wickets, and most dismissals. So I'll give you just a brief summation of how it went. Most runs, Tymal Mills said Virat Kohli. I said Joe Root. And obviously, India only batting once doesn't help Tymal's case. Kohli made a duck, and Joe Root made 35. So that's 1 to me. Come on, Tymal, man. Secondly, the wickets, Tymal said Jack Leach, his countryman. I said Axar Patel. Axar Patel got 9 in the game. Jack Leach got 2. And finally, the most dismissals, we both said Ben Foakes, and he only got 1 in the entire game. And Rishabh Pant got 4. So right now it's 2-0 to me. What a start that is! And Tymal is yet to get on the board.
Score.
That's shocking.
I'll give you a head start. I'll give you a head start.
That's shocking, man. Come on. International analysts like you. Come on.
T20 series coming up next. White ball cricket. That's my forte. I actually know what's going on in T20 cricket. So I'll pull it back then.
We shall see. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching every episode of this test series. That's been it. Of course, India cruising to a massive win in this test series, 3-1. They get to the World Test Championship final against New Zealand. Don't go anywhere because we will be back, as Tymal just previewed, the T20 series, the one-day series, the IPL. We have so much exciting content coming up for you guys. Please stay locked. Tell your friends about this show, the Pace Journal Preview and Review Show. That's been it. Thank you so much once again. Tymal, over to you.
Yeah, cheers, guys. As you say, we're back. New channel for us, so keep trying to grow it. Hopefully, it's some good insight. So we'll be back in a few days' time. We'll drop a preview in for the T20 series. We've already conducted a little interview for you guys with somebody in one of the camps, so keep an eye out for that. And we'll keep supporting us. We appreciate it.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Welcome to the Pace Judge.